You mentioned Olivet Discourse, and I really want to focus on the Olivet Discourse. I've oftentimes said that there's an expanded Olivet Discourse, and that is the book of Revelation, but you can get it all packed into a passage like Matthew chapter 24. And many years ago, I took the time to memorize this passage and then to cogitate on it, to really think about it deeply. But to set this up, Gary, you have Jesus leaving the temple. He's walking away, and his disciples then call his attention to its buildings. And then Jesus says, "Do you see all these things? I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." And then later on, Jesus is sitting on the Mount of Olives, and then his disciples come to him. And this is a private meeting they're having, and they say, "When is this going to happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" And then you have the remainder of the Olivet Discourse in answer to that, part of which is Jesus is saying all this is going to happen within a generation. So I want to talk about that. So here you have the disciples coming up to Jesus privately and saying, "When will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" What in the world was the real answer to that question? In other words, what was Jesus telling his disciples in response to this question?
Yeah, you mentioned briefly the background to this. Unfortunately, with our Bible, fortunately and unfortunately, we have the Bible divided up into chapters and verse numbers. Those weren't there originally. And so chapter 24 follows immediately after chapter 23. So if you want to get the context of all of this, chapter 23, actually, if you really want to get the full context of this, you go all the way back to Matthew chapter 21 and follow it all the way through and look at the context and Jesus dealing with the religious leaders and so forth. And then this is all coming to a head if you look at chapter 23, verse 31. "Consequently, you bear witness against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of the guilt of your fathers." This is the same type of language that Stephen uses in Acts chapter 7, 51 and 52. "You serpents, you brood of vipers, how shall you escape the sentence of hell? Therefore, behold, I am sending you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, that upon you may fall the guilt of all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were unwilling. Behold, your house is being left to you desolate. For I say to you, from now on, you shall not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Jesus came out from the temple. And so what happens in chapter 24 is based upon what Jesus was saying to the religious leaders and his disciples listening to all this. And that's why they asked the questions to them, because Jesus basically, he said, your temples, your house is going to be left to you desolate. And as a result of that, they're really mystified by it. This temple has finally been rebuilt. We're in the process of rebuilding it, if you go back to John chapter 2. And you're telling me this is going to be destroyed? And so then Jesus tells them what was going to happen. You not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down. And in the dispensational system, what you've got to do here is to maintain that there is a rebuilt temple, that there's going to be another temple in the future that this is going to happen to. And yet there isn't a single verse in the entire New Testament that says anything about a rebuilt temple. And then sure enough, in AD 70, when the Romans came in, they tore the temple down literally. And we talk about literal here, literally stone by stone. And if you go to Israel today, you won't find any indication that the temple was still standing, because stone by stone was torn down. And then Jesus lays out what I believe are signs that, these things are going to take place. These are signs that are probably typical of all types of generations, but then he's going to lead up to what is most specific about this, the greatest sign of all, and then he capstones that particular prophecy with verse 34, where he says, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And you mentioned Shermer, and I didn't realize that he once was an evangelical at a certain point, but so was Bart Ehrman. And if you go back to Bart Ehrman's history, he'll tell you that he went to Moody, and he believed this too, and he even mentions Tim LaHaye and Hal Lindsey. And a professor says, well, what if Jesus was wrong? And that set Bart Ehrman on the path of skepticism based on prophecy. And, of course, you and I, when we study this particular passage, Jesus wasn't wrong at all. Jesus was right on the money. He said the temple would be destroyed before that generation passed away. And sure enough, the temple was destroyed before that particular generation passed away.